Welcome everybody to the Hutt Valley Shared Services Committee, Friday the 2nd of May. We've got all in attendance except for we've got an apology from the Mayor, and he's got Deputy Swales in attendance as his alternate. I moved the apology for the deputy to receive and for a seconder. Councillor Newell, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye. No.
Against? We've also got Councillor Ultra in the room who'd like speaking rights. So I move that Councillor Ultra be granted speaking rights and no voting rights. Can I call for a seconder on that? Tony, Councillor Stellinger, thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Public forum, we don't have any anybody speaking today, but we do have a paper that's been put by Daniel Chrisp, and I'd like to table that as paper that will just read in their own time. I won't read it out for everybody. I'll move that it be tabled. Councillor Carson, all those in favour? Thank you. Declarations of interest on item 3. Any elected members here their interest today? Otherwise, just contact the staff. Operations. So item number 4, we got the confirmation of the minutes. The record of the Hutt Valley Service Committee meeting held on the 7th of March. It's page 4 of our agenda. Any questions about the accuracy of those minutes? Then I'll move that the committee confirms the minutes of the Hutt Valley Services Committee meeting held on the 7th of March 2025 are true and correct. Recorded the meeting. Call for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Newell. Is there any debate? Then all those in favour say aye.
Could I register an abstention as I wasn't present? Thank you.
We'll move on to item 5. Got the wastewater joint venture update. 1st February to 31 March. We've got the staff here from Hutt. Report on the strategic advisor for the Director of Environment and Sustainability, Hutt Valley Council. And you've got the floor is yours, sir. Any updates on that report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we'd like to do today is start off with a presentation. So it's attached, I think it's Appendix 3 to the report. For a number of meetings, we've been reporting on the seaweed plant, the consent renewal, and this is in relation to that, the work that's going on the Hutt Valley Wastewater Strategy and the outfall pipe. So we've got Fraser Clark and Jeff from Wellington Water who are going to go through the presentations with you.
Let's come out. Morning, councillors. I'm Fraser Clark. I'm the head of strategy for Three Waters at Wellington Water. With me is Jeff Williams, a principal advisor, strategy, collectively our strategy team at Wellington Water. Just take you through, as Bruce said, progress, what we're up to in terms of wastewater system strategy, and in conjunction with that, looking at the Seaview wastewater treatment renewal project. So I'm just going to take you through some context to talk about, and then Jeff will take you through the process that we're following in terms of that work and where we're up to, so you get that update. Main purpose in all this is to say an update on things. Some of the main points: Seaview bypass into the Waiwhetu, significant compliance risk for us and councils. This is the discharge of treated wastewater into the Waiwhetu when it's insufficient capacity or the outfall pipe is unavailable. We've been operating under a resource consent application since about 2017. So that's just a sort of legacy there, but range of issues why that hasn't progressed to a completed resource consent. In conjunction with that, the outfall pipe, increasing issues mitigations that affects its capacity. We're looking at replacement cost of that estimated that's gone into the LTP process around $800 million. So a decision we don't want to take lightly. So it's and discharge its own consent expiring in 2031. I think legacy, political, cultural reasons why those two consents are separate, despite essentially being part of the same system. The two work hand in hand. The only reason you have a bypass is because of the outfall pipe and its inability. So why they're separate, there's some history there, but we need to look at them collectively. So that's what we're looking at, trying to look at a system level, get to the point where we understand the right set of investments at the right order and can have an investment case for you that can seek the funding, the right funding for the right projects. We're doing that with some input from the Sivu Oroku stakeholder steering group. Greater Wellington as the regulator requested that there be broad stakeholder involvement. This is the process that we're using for that. It has councils and mana whenua in that group helping to provide some direction, not decision making, but just helping to make sure we're all aligned in direction, and when an investment is sought, that we've got that support behind it. So this is the system that we're looking at. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Collection from the valley, from Wainuiamata, from Eastbourne, all coming together to the treatment plant at Seaview, and then treated wastewater, ideally running through that outfall pipe 18 kilometres around the coast and out at Pencarrow. So that's the looking at that collective system running alongside the river Waifetu and into the harbour. So sort of sitting in the catchment there, and so that asset, the main one there, the outfall pipe, 1950s. Issues with failures around joints and seals that have meant we've had to turn down the capacity of that, which then causes constraints elsewhere in the system. So trying to solve that at a system level. This previous slide and the next couple just helping to put that system into context. Collection running through to treatment and discharge with all the challenges that come with that. We've got aged assets, both public and private, changing environmental standards, climate change, growth, all sorts of performance challenges that we need to think about in that system, different parts of that system contributing in different ways. Trying to think about, and so we end up with water that we don't want to get in there, getting in there, stormwater, groundwater, water that we don't want to get out, getting out, wastewater and some untreated wastewater into Te Awakairangi and its tributaries and into Waifetu and so ultimately the treated discharge. And then around that, significant change, plan change one, increasing expectations around environmental standards and the discharges into the environment, and perhaps tied to that, potential wastewater standards being proposed in new legislation via Akatarawa. So basically a change in standards from what we've seen in the past. So this one's meant to, I guess, bring it home at the system level. So, water getting out that we don't want out, overflows. We would have been overflowing over the course of this last few days, probably at Silverstream, bypass, the next one, that sort of the light blue line, also probably operated over this weekend. So, most of the wastewater stays in the pipes when we want it, but increasing amounts coming out, which we don't want, and expectations that should be less and less. The challenge being then, so we talk about it at a system level, if we want to stop the water getting into the Waifetu, which is obviously especially important for mana whenua, you then have to make sure you can get it all out with the pipe, the outfall pipe, and so we've got a capacity difference between what goes in and what that pipe can accommodate. And then further up the system, that if we want to keep all that water in the pipes as well, that means more water flowing to the treatment plant, which means more water flowing to the outfall pipe, which we know has got its capacity challenges. And then you add growth and things, and so that problem, how do we look after that system and get things moving in the right order? So across that, potentially billions of dollars worth of investment along that whole system what we're trying to do with our work is understand what is the right set of activities in the right sequence to manage those environmental outcomes while considering affordability, community outcomes, etc. So that's the process we're trying to get to. Let's spend the time up front to understand how that system works and what it needs before going out and spending money that might not be the right money to spend. So with that, I'll hand to Jeff.
Thanks, Fraser. So just take you through kind of how we're going about, I guess, understanding the problem and solving it in terms of meeting outcomes over the long term. I guess it's kind of fairly clear from the beginning that there's an outfall pipe that's under capacity and a history of failures. So there's a renewal problem to start with. That's kind of fairly clear. And then obviously the way it's been described here, you can see a picture that the outfall pipe isn't an asset and it's in isolation, it's part of a system. And if you try and address the outfall pipe issues without considering what the upstream impacts will be, you kind of run the risk of potentially making a regretful choice. So two work streams set up here. One looking at the Hutt Valley wastewater system as a whole, and one looking at the outfall pipe renewal. So just in terms of the deliverables of this work, we're looking to prepare a strategic plan for the Hutt Valley wastewater system. And we're looking to prepare an investment case and a pre-concept design for the recommended option for the in terms of the strategic plan, kind of what that is, just to kind of paint that picture, it's really getting clarity about what it is that we want to achieve with the system as a whole. What are the problems now and what are they going to be like in the future potentially? What options we've got, how they should be sequenced, and then ultimately what we need to be monitoring over the long term to make sure that we react to changing environment and changing context at the right time. The investment case is really all about the basis for seeking funding, and introduces other aspects in terms of commercial, financial and management cases. The pre-concept design is really all about setting the project up for the delivery phases in terms of the parameters for the recommended option. So I guess the strategic planning part, particularly important in a case like this where you've got a problem that's fairly clear, but where the system as a whole has complex reactions between parts of the system, and you can't deal with one part in isolation. And just a little bit more visibility over what the two work streams have kind of got involved in them. On the left, we're looking at stages of the strategic planning process. It's kind of showing where we are now in the project and where we hope to be in a couple of years' time. And on the right, it's showing how the strategic planning feeds into the investment case and the pre-concept design for the recommended option for the outfall pipe. And then how that feeds back into the investment round, the next investment round, which noting we'll have some uncertainties about what that looks like. And then ultimately how that investment planning process feeds back into delivery of the recommended option. The strategic planning itself is quite a structured process. We're following the same process that we used successfully for the Wellington Metropolitan Water Supply System back in 2023, the last investment round. There's a sequence of steps that we go through. I kind of won't go through them in detail one by one, but I guess the purpose of the stages of the strategic planning is to ultimately minimise the risk of a regretful investment. And that's all about efficient allocation of capital in a constrained environment, really. So the process does this by looking for options that are looking for options for the right problem that are feasible, deliverable, pitched at the scale of the problem, and kind of tested against a wide range of future scenarios so that we build that robustness and that confidence that we are making the right choices. The project as a whole is well kind of tuned to the next investment round in terms of outputs from the project are intended to feed into the next investment planning round. Noting, of course, that we don't exactly know what that will look like. We can say that the Water Services Delivery Plan has got approximately $800 million in it for renewal of the outfall pipe, and so that this work is particularly important that we do it now to get it right so that we're confident that that is indeed the right choice to make. So next couple of slides really is about where we've got to so far working with the CV Rōpū. So in terms of the Rōpū that was initially set up in late 2023, when this project we're talking about now was set up, the scope of the Rōpū was also expanded to align with the scope of the project. So we're taking a whole of system view. So rather than the Rōpū focusing on the intermittent discharge, the Rōpū now is providing stakeholder reference group functions for the project as a whole, which is the whole system view. And just to be clear again, it's not a decision-making group, and that's no ambiguity in that. So what we're looking at here on this slide is the outcome statement that the groups worked to prepare, and won't read it out, but I'll just kind of skip over a couple of these slides because I'm just trying to essentially give you a sense of there is progress being made. It's foundational work. It's quite important that you get this part of the process right because everything builds on it from there. So shared understanding of the problems is particularly important. And what we're looking at here, again, I won't read them out, but we're talking about familiar themes with what Fraser was just describing in terms of the system challenges as a whole. And again, building on the context of the problem, this is what the group has prepared in terms of investment objectives across different areas. Key points, obviously, long-term value for money, supporting growth, impacts of climate change and being prepared for that, and some other things as well. Now, these investment objectives will then be supported by more detailed evaluation criteria. And then those criteria will be used to score and assess options in what we refer to as a shortlisting process. Moving along, looking at what that shortlisting process kind of looks like. So I guess what we're doing is we're moving into sort of more detail of what the project's actually covering, just to give you a bit of visibility of that. The shortlisting process to achieve a robust outcome in the strategic planning work, the shortlisting process has to start with all options on the table, no matter how silly they might seem, or far-fetched, or even offensive to some groups. All options start on the table, and then we go through a process of progressively screening those options. And obviously, you start with a very long list, and you want to end up with a short list that you apply more significant resources to assess feasibility and costs and all the rest. So it's a process of applying progressively more resources at a shorter and shorter list.
Is there a weighting against these investment objectives to get you to the slide that we're on now?
There hasn't been so far, no, but there will need to be weightings applied to the evaluation criteria for the shortlisting process. That is correct. Yep.
And that will be against these 5 criteria that you've got. You would use them as your matrix.
Those 5 criteria will then be supported by more detailed criteria with more guidance around what is good and what is bad, if you like, as seen by the reference group.
Thank you.
So ultimately, the shortlist of options then gets tested in a process where we assemble those options into kind of sequences or pathways, if you like. I don't get into too much jargon here, but it's a process where you sequence the options in different orders, if you like, and then you stress test those options against as wide a range of possible futures as can be kind of plausibly compiled. You're not looking for far-fetched future scenarios, but you are looking for all ranges of climate change, sea level, population growth, and all the rest. So you kind of really want to build confidence that the options that we ultimately end up recommending for investment will stand up to meeting the challenges of today and of tomorrow, and will have the path of least regret, if you like. So just zooming back out to the timeline of the whole project here. Key deliverables, again, strategic plan and an investment case are the focus for the coming 25-26 financial year. That will feed into the next investment round, whatever that looks like. And the focus of the following year will be on taking that recommended option that we've developed and just trying to reduce the risks with the unknowns, improve the cost estimate, targeted investigations to make sure that we understand the project as best as we can before it moves to the delivery phases. And so I guess it sounds like a long time. It sounds like a lot of work. It is a lot of work. We're definitely hearing loud and clear that the work needs to be done quickly. So that we're tuned to that for sure. And we're trying to kind of reflect that in the program by running activities in parallel as much as you can, without introducing too many risks. So that's kind of picture we're trying to paint here. There's a lot of work running in parallel, and there is a lot of work to get this right, and there's quite big consequences if we get it wrong. So that's kind of all I wanted to cover off. I'll just quickly hand back to Fraser to wrap up.
Can I just ask a question though before we raise it? I was waiting till the end of the thing. So if I'm to look at the timeline, which is a slide prior to this, but then go back to page 32, which is your work stream 1 and 2. So when I look at the timeline with the wastewater strategic plan, that's stream work 1 and 2 collectively together, just so that I've got it clear in my mind. Is that what we talk about, the wastewater strategic plan?
Well, the wastewater strategic plan really is the piece that's going to end in the 25-26 financial year. So that's the foundational bit which confirms what the problems are in the context and make sure that we are trying to solve the right problems and recommends the solutions for the system as a whole. The work stream 2 is really all about, we know we've got an outfall pipe that's in bad shape and it's under capacity, and so we know we need to do something with that asset particularly. We may also need to do other things. We may need to, in the longer term, reduce inflows and infiltration into the wastewater system to reduce the downstream burden. But work stream 2 is really about, well, that will take us through to the 26-27 financial year, and will feed into the delivery process for the outfall pipe renewal specifically. So that's kind of what that work stream 2 is all about.
So to go back to, and it's, sorry, Chair, can I? Thank you. I apologise, not going through youth this time. So if I go back to what Fraser said at the opening statement with regard to this presentation, I still need it really clear in my mind that we've got a pot of money of 800 million right here, which is just the outflow pipe. But you're talking about a whole strategic wastewater view, which includes the outlet pipe for 100-year view and capacity that's going to service both the Hutt and Lower Hutt, right? Upper Hutt and Lower Hutt, yeah. So how much money are we looking at then in that first stream, which is the wastewater? Because we talk about 800, which, you know, that's eye-watering. So what's the other part of that equation? How much money are we looking there?
Do you mean for the delivery of the strategic plan, or do you mean for all of the options that will then come out?
All of the options, because I mean, at the moment, you're just getting us to think about the outflow pipe, but you start talking about actually it's the whole system, because if we do things out of sequence, then we're going to be mucked up, right? So from a governance perspective, I'd like to know what is the whole picture. Don't drive me into an isolation of the outlet pipe when you're telling me that actually it's got to be sequenced.
Yeah, well, I think that's
Your turn, Fraser.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So yeah, the strategic plan is trying to paint that picture of it might be investment in the network and the treatment plant and the outfall pipe or whatever we use to return that water back to the environment. We've absolutely got a kind of, in a way, time bound on the outfall pipe and its connection to the discharge into Waifetua in the sense of consenting and engaged condition. But we've also got there's across the Hutt Valley as a whole, it will be in the hundreds of millions of dollars envisaged around meeting network discharge standards. You're reducing overflows in the network. There is investment in there and renewals that has to happen anyway. There is growth that you're envisaging. So I can't really put, that's why I said at the start, potentially billions in that system as a whole over the time of this project. And what we're trying to do is say, ultimately the strategic plan will say something here for the outfall and give you that complete picture, but you'll have that before you get to the decision on the outfall.
Okay.
So you'll be able to make it when the time comes to make an investment decision on outfall pipe, you'll know where that sits in the context of everything else that's needed in wastewater.
Yeah, but I have another question, if that's okay. Thank you. So with all of this coming in line, and you're talking about having the investment or the financials in the 26-27 year, right? So is that going to be before we hold over our assets to the new entity of Local Water Done Well? Because if it's before that, that could actually trigger an amendment to any of our council's LTP plans.
So I think that's what we said, that the process around future investment round is a little bit unclear. So I say at the moment, the investment in the outfall pipe, the pocket of money, the pretty big pocket, is sitting towards the end of the first 10 years of the proposed water service delivery plan. It's not in your current LTP, but it's in that plan. If the change to the new entity happens in July 26 next year, then that will be before I think any decision is actually made, but it will then be sitting in the water service delivery plan. You're expecting to make an investment and you'll walk towards that. The process in the legislation kind of it almost kind of bypasses that delivery plan, that the new entity has a statement of expectations from its shareholders, which is councils, and then writes a water services strategy, which is a bit like an asset management plan. So that would then have shareholders have said this is what's important. Water services strategy says this is what we're doing about it. And in that framework, you'll probably that's probably where the next investment round starts to play, but then it's not LTPs, and the decision-making process is quite different in that new.
So you're just warming us up before what the.
Well, I'm saying I think it's going to be, I think the new entity will be ultimately making this decision, not yourselves as.
Just wanted to totally understand that timeline that you've got up there, because it is going to have an impact on us as councils where we're going.
Yeah, so either most likely as the owners of a new entity, but clearly important for the region, then you know, it's a pretty big chunk of money in the regional service delivery story.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
That's for sure.
Thanks for that. Thank you for this report, because you're breaking down and trying to simplify what is really quite a complex project. I can see that here. My question actually just relates specifically to the treated wastewater discharge into the Waikato stream. It's going on for quite a few years now. And you made a comment about the system as a whole is complex. Appreciate that. You can't do it in isolation. But is there the potential for along the way that you can stage and prioritise parts of the pipeline renewal? So you could potentially start with that issue around wastewater discharge into the Waikato stream, and would you have to do the whole project all as one?
I think that's sort of what we're looking to understand, is what's that opportunity. There might be things that we can do, for example, to push out the really big investment for a few years if we see that there's actions we can take in advance of that. And working together within that group, which has got Taranaki Whānui in there, it's a chance to understand, you know, well, we've got discharges happening into Te Awakairangi of untreated wastewater from overflows. Similarly into Waikato, we've got treated wastewater going into Waikato, and we've got treated wastewater going into the ocean. But how do we, you know, relative choices then between those impacts? Where's the right way to spend that money and to lift performance along that system? And it might be that one goes, yes, prioritise Waikato first and understand that might, or we'll go other places first because there's bigger consequences knowing that we'll get there. So that's part of the journey with them, is trying to understand this is a long run game, different impacts, different consequences along that system. How do we find the right way?
Thank you.
Christian, Councillor Neil and Carson.
So the way you've presented this, it's as if we just discovered that this is a major problem, whereas in fact it was a problem back in 1989. And I think Councillor Stallinger will remember many times that we knew that this was a problem. So I'm wondering what kind of historical look you're taking as part of the strategic review. What history are you looking back on? And what have we said in the past that obviously we have not actioned?
Well, I can say that we have gone as part of the context setting for this work. There's been a situational analysis report produced. It's draft at the moment. It's of the order 200 pages long, and it brings in all of the previous work that's been done. I want to keep a positive outlook on it. What we're trying to do with this piece of work is specifically apply a whole system view to it, not individual assets with individual problems. That's the point of difference, I think, with this work that we're doing, that maybe hasn't quite been done in the same way in the past. So yes, take the point, the outfall pipe has had joint failures since the first year it was put in, or maybe shortly after. But in terms of the challenges we've got now with the Waikato consent, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not sure if that's quite adequately answering your question, to be honest, but we're taking into account everything that has been done, and we're trying to take that whole system view. Simple. Yeah.
Chair, I'm reassured somewhat that history is being looked at and is being incorporated in it. Thank you.
You raise a point though with the kicking it down the road story. This is the end of that road, isn't it? We've kicked it as far as we kick it. We are doing it. So
2031, you're going to need to reconsent something there, and if there's not a robust answer to that, then that's going to be a challenge. So there's some things that are now quite time bound for us. And I guess the other, so we've absolutely got plenty of reports about, you know, investigations into pipes options that are all going to help us to move the story forward. And we've also now got perhaps a different story around growth expectations than we may have had in years gone by. At the time we thought that growth wasn't going to happen, now we've got a different scenario, information about climate change, changed environmental context. That means that we need to, as well as looking back, we also have a different sense of what the future looks like. We need to bring into the story as well.
That's where you Councillor. Councillor Carson.
Thanks, Chair. 2 points that I'd like to comment on, please, Fraser. One is looking at that slide, need is increasing along the system, where the current demand is 2.6k litres. And they're rising up to a future 4.8, where the Seaview plant at the moment can only treat 2.610. So seems to me perhaps that even more, whatever you do to the Seaview treatment plant, that's not going to meet the 4.8 future demand, which sort of brings to me perhaps Seaview treatment plant is in the wrong location when you couple that with climate change and rising sea levels. So that's just one point that you might like to comment on.
Yeah, so that's capacity. I might need Steve to make sure, tell me if I get this wrong, but treatment, with the existing configuration, but we have the ability in the plant today to add, for example, additional process trains and things to make that plant enable that plant to accommodate
4.8.
The layout of that plant in 2000 was set to receive up to 3,000 litres a second. So hydraulically, we can accommodate that. Treatment processes are already rated to 2,600, so there could be an upgrade to get to 3,000. And the council's sufficient land to do a 50% upgrade of the plant. So there's land to the west and the south of the plant that's there. As I've said before, it's not great land, given that what we now know about sea level rise and so on. So there is strategically you have more land there. The concept had envisaged a 50% uplift on the current technology and layout.
So with expansion and improvement in its efficiency, you can meet future demand in its current location, forgetting about climate change and sea level rise. Okay,
so
okay.
that's part of the
Right. So the second point I like to make is that all the discussion about funding predicates or presumes that it's all going to be met by through the new CCO, which is basically charging users in the future, right? So not only ratepayers, but all users in the future. However, is your investment criteria when you're evaluating all the options considering private partnership?
That's
Because
probably,
you know what the coalition government is view on that.
I think at the strategic level, we're just trying to understand that kind of the value for money piece generally, sort of without being clear on where the money's come from. What's the least amount of money you need to make it work? I think as you get further, there's probably 2 things in that. One, for the new entity, its options for funding will be different to yours as council. That might create opportunities that once you get to either the investments of that entity as a whole or individual investments, and the chance that we might go as we work through the specific investment case might go, actually there's a commercial opportunity here, whatever it looks like, to enable this project to be made cheaper through this procurement or commercial approach. But that's not something we're trying to do at the strategic level. But it's definitely
trying to make the point that it's not only going to be, hopefully, I mean, ultimately the user will have to pay, whether it's private partnership totally or a combination of local authority through the CCO or private, but ultimately the users, and the question is, what is the least cost to the user in terms of that funding, those funding alternatives or a mix of
it's something there for the entity to look at its investments, the whole land for individual players to look at what's the opportunity here to do this cheaply using someone else's money.
Thank you.
Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. Are you wanting questions on the paper or just on the presentation?
Just the presentation.
Cool. On the options assessment that's happening, are there any elected members that are kind of part of those conversations, or will there be an opportunity for elected members to see them and?
Yeah. It's, at the moment, the process is the Roka, which has, officers, involved. Probably need to. What are we looking at? What to the officers?
Simply said not at this stage.
Yeah, okay, cool. And you say all options on the table, is the Gollins Farm, the new purchase through regional council, one of those options?
Pretty sure there was some comment that was about that, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then kind of building on Chris's question, under the Providence statements, you talk about future growth constraints. With the timeline, this is quite a long timeline to get this pipeline in place, and it sounds like turning down the pressure semi-regularly to combat the leaking issue. Is there any, well, I'm assuming there is any risk, but what's the likelihood that we're going to get to a stage where we're like the South Wairarapa, where we say, hey, sorry, we're at capacity because of the outfall pipe, there's no new development, the plant's fine-ish, but the outfall pipe is now the bottleneck. Is there a future in 5-6 years time before the pipe's done that we go, actually, we're
Probably the big uncertainty there is what consents are able to be made, or the constraints around future consents for the network discharges, the overflows into the untreated overflows, which are going to be subject to the standards that come out of Plan Change 1, which is currently being at the moment. There is regional council definitely in implementing the national policy statement for freshwater management. They're requiring an improvement in freshwater quality and coastal water quality. And so the answer will really depend on the outcome of that.
So it's quite a big unknown of how much
they want to improve water quality. Growth, will only put more pressure on the current infrastructure out of that. So it's going to be that balancing act of infrastructure keeping up with growth, keeping up with environmental water quality, we get through standards.
Thank you. And I noticed in the timeline there's quite a big gaping gap where reform is obviously happening. There's everything that we're kind of doing now, which is obviously great work, being taken with the idea that reform is more than likely going to happen, and that we're not going to be duplicating even here. The new water entity is not going to come in and say, let's stop all the work the councils are doing and take a strategic approach to wastewater for the whole region, and that bit you were doing for the Hutt Valley is actually not important anymore. Are we wasting time or money doing this work now, or is it going to definitely be needed come reform?
I don't think so, but I'm not the new chief executive or board of that new entity. But my sense would be that there's clear, especially around wastewater, there are clear catchments that need to work. And pretty hard to make wastewater because it's all gravity based. Pretty hard to make it work across catchments. So I think. And even then, so it's planning work that looks at that future. It's not we're out of place, but it's essentially no. I think it's low risk of being regretful work when you consider shareholders. The legacy of having these assets there as they are. I mean, maybe a new entity comes along and asks that question. But in the meantime, you have to assume these assets are here for 100 plus years, need to keep on performing, need to understand what the investment need is. Maybe you can do some sort of step back. But I think realistically, this is work for the future, for whoever's running that future.
Thank you.
Just to expand on question, you talked earlier on about the invasion of stormwater into the wastewater system. Is that sort of weighted heavier once that pressure comes on from development? If we ever get to a point where we start thinking about we cannot capacity to do this because of these things. I mean, the overflow at Silverstream, I believe, is a lot to do with the invasion of water rather than actually waste into that system. Where do we get to a point where we need to address that first, or sooner, rather than just wait and, carry on with the outfall, but, start leaning on that a bit heavier.
I think that's what we're, part of this work is trying to understand what's if that's potentially, taking action on that inflow and infiltration is potentially the most significant action we can take to reduce total investment and improve environmental performance along that system. Potentially, that's what we're sort of trying to understand, in which case we'd be coming to you at the end of this process saying, increase your funding and renewals, do more work around working with private households to manage the quality of their assets, because that's your biggest bang for buck. So that's what we're trying to explore. And to Steve's point, the discharge consent process is going to push us along that journey as well. The expectation that we'll be reducing those overflows through that process. So it's coming at us from regulatory and investment need and community and mana whenua expectations.
We talk quite a bit around council chambers at the moment around development contributions and those sort of things. I mean, not to just go, let's go for money from somewhere. But I mean, they're obviously the reason why there's becoming more pressure on our systems. The development contribution, is there a portion of that is actually on renewal or upgrade of it? It's a conversation that gets had up Hutt quite often. Every time we do a new development, it's like, blah, blah, blah. You've got to plug 700 new houses in. Where's that extra money? So is there a portion of that actually gets fed into renewal, not just in general?
Yeah, so there's a process that we go through as a new asset is considered around what proportion of that is growth related and what proportion relates to level of service for existing customers. We've been, fortunately, the pressure we've been putting on existing assets means that a lot of the investment that's needed is just to either maintain or ensure level of service for existing customers, and the proportion that's growth related is relatively modest. But yes, we try and give you that information to say when we're renewing this pipe, 15% of it is to enable growth, and you can then feed that into your DC's process or consider that. So we definitely try and identify that for you.
Thank you for hearing me. Councillor Stone.
I think just a question on the chart on our page 31, which is the one that shows the house, the water flowing through the treatment plant, as you can see in the simplified format. Some councillors know I tend to look at numbers. I'm just trying to satisfy my accountant's mind. So we've got 2,600 litres a second being produced by homes and businesses. About 1/10% of that gets overflowed untreated. A small percentage, but nevertheless unpleasant. And so the bulk of that ends up at the Seaview treatment plant, which outflows about half of that volume down the pipeline, and a bit less than 1% gets overflowed to Waifa 2. Now, I just don't quite clear what happens to the balance of it. Of that what we stay off with. Does it evaporate or?
First point is that those are the peak flows. So like in
just
an event like yesterday.
Okay, that's fine. I've got it. This doesn't say.
Normally we'll get about 600 litres a second on average dry weather.
Okay.
It's you and say everything flows all the way through the plant, all the way through. It's those peaks which we can only give us, the base out the outflow.
That's all.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the tanks in Silverstream. I'm assuming those are the attenuation wastewater tanks, and could you talk about their effectiveness and whether that is a system that is being repeated around the valley anywhere else? Is it something that can be helpful?
It can be helpful, and that tank has been quite effective because there's a large capacity of infrastructure that gets down through Eastern Hutt Road back to where it crosses the river, and then there's a smaller pipe that goes down the valley. So going back to the 70s, 80s, there was a plan to put a third new pipe from Silverstream all the way down through Lower Hutt. With population growth at the time, that wasn't viewed to be an appropriate investment, so storage was used. Just take those peaks, like we were just talking about, where the rainfall comes up only for so many days a year, and to catch those peaks. So Silverstream has been very effective, and more storage is pretty standard part of infrastructure planning, but it only works to a point. You know, comes a point where you've got so much flow, can't actually empty that storage, and the storage is all full. So there's definitely a balance. If you've been driving past Potirua lately, you'd probably see a very large tank being built opposite that railway station, which is similar. It's actually slightly smaller than Silverstream, 7 million compared to the 10 at Silverstream, but we have envisaged further storage at Silverstream at some stage, and council holds land accordingly. But when we look at the higher growth and the longer growth projections at some stage, you just, it's not viable long term. So there'll be a staging consideration.
Thank you. Does that answer your inquiry, councillor Upper? Did councillor Swales have further
Not on the PowerPoint when we get to talk to.
question? Any more questions for the PowerPoint? Thank you, councillor Carson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to deliver a bouquet to Wellington Water, believe it or not. And that's to attachment 3, which is your Wellington Water Limited Capital Delivery Dashboard. I think we've finally reached nirvana on the reporting.
Thank you. Got the information. We'll move on to the actual report. You got an update or anything during before we begin? Or first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to defer to Jeremy today to give an update.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Just wanted to introduce Charles Parker as well. He's our new Chief Operating Officer.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come along. It's the type of joint really complex, and it's a really good opportunity for me to come along, understand directly from you the type of concerns that you're having with Wellington Water and the venture. And I'm also the interim acting GM for the capital delivery. So I've got 2 hats at the moment. So potentially I might be able to answer some of the capital delivery questions on the dashboard. And if not, I'll give the answers for you. But thank you for the opportunity to come.
Cool. So just on the report, the good news is that the plant has returned to full effluent compliance for all parameters on the 1st of March. Also the State Highway 2, since writing the paper, State Highway 2 Western Trunk Main project was successfully completed on Sunday. There were no discharges to the Wastewater stream recorded during the reporting period. The dryer remains a high-risk component of the plant system, and the first of at least 2 extended dry shutdowns is planned for early June. We will provide more details on this work and the dryer replacement at a combined council meeting on the 7th. A comprehensive communication of the shutdown plan to the broader stakeholder group has been developed and is about to commence. The plan has been worked through with council officers. It covers the broader scope of the work being undertaken, the start date and project work timeframe, sludge transportation plans and odour mitigation. And planning is underway for the next shutdown, which will occur later this year. The shutdowns enable major components of the dryer to be refurbished or replaced to help keep the dryer operational for the next 2 to 3 years. We are better prepared to deal with the impact of an unexpected dry shutdown. And on the odour, there were 7 odour complaints for February, 18 recorded for March, and no complaints recorded for April. 2 of the complaints were deemed to be objectionable and offensive by the regional council. They were on the 26th and 29th of March, which was perplexing for us as the plant was operating normally and the plant was healthy. The regional council officers were pointing towards issues with the dryer with some dried pellets that was spilt as a probable source, but the operators in Wellington Water think it's unlikely. However, I mean, we continue to be vigilant, monitoring odour and doing everything we can to minimise that. So odour treatment remains a priority, and as noted in the body of the report, tenders for stage 2 of the odour treatment project closed in mid-March, and since writing, the contract has now been awarded. Millie screens are also a high risk due to the poor condition We currently have 5 of the 10 milliscreens operational. Non-functional units have been refurbished. We remain focused on refurbishing and maintaining the operational units until the renewals can be implemented over the coming years. 4 of the milliscreens are planned for the next financial year, with all 10 new screens planned to be replaced before the end of the financial year 2029. This work has been complicated as there are no direct replacements available. We're currently having the design of the replacements peer reviewed. So they're the main points, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, some questions? Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. You mentioned our workshop that's coming up. Is that going to happen before the community communications happen, or the other way around? Just thinking if there's things that we might want to feedback in terms of. On the milliscreen renewal, is there any risk to odour while that work's underway, or is it kind of fixing the stuff that's not working now anyway? So
there's limited risk. So as we remove the milliscreens to work on them, there's like an air gap there, but we have got mitigations in place for that. Yeah, so.
And the stage 2 of the odour treatment project is to duct the milliscreen building. Will that happen before we start working on the milliscreens, or there'll be a bit of an overlap?
That's happening right now. We're sort of refurbishing and renewing it. There's constant work going on now. Has been going on for some time.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a question on those milliscreens? Once the 10 are all refurbished and up to date, does it pretty much start again, or is there a time frame that we satisfactory for, or is it just consistent?
Well, it's rotating machinery, and to compare it to a vehicle, like a car, they run 24/7. And in fact, those milliscreens do have a certain amount of duty standby, but they're running constantly, so there's always maintenance on them.
Any further questions? Councillor Swales.
I have a couple, and I'd like to go to the dashboards, if that's okay, if they start on page 22 for us. So I have a few around them. So when you go to the dashboard, you've got this percentage underneath everything. You've got, dates and then a percentage, 49, 30, 57. What does that mean? Is that how much work has been done? Before I get to the questions and
The blue-green line. That percentage will be.
so right at the very bottom, before you've got the blue-green line, you've got percentages. What do they mean? So you've got, on the very first one, you've got 49, the next one 30, and then the ones 57, 45. What do they mean? I was just wondering why they were there.
I think that's percentage complete overall.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure that that's what it was.
Of the cost.
Of the cost or of the program? Budget. Okay, right. Then my next question is, when I look at the division of the split of the cost, we seem to have slightly changed the third percentage by a little bit. So you go for the first couple of pages, but then you move from a 69.64% for Hutt down to a different percentage. The last page we're at 66.28, 33.72 for Upper Hutt. Is that because of the type of work that's involved? Why have we got the variances in the splits?
That's in accordance with the 1999 cost allocation agreement between the two councils, so work in simple terms at the treatment plant. One will Hutt contribute. The other projects upstream of the treatment plant in the Hutt does not contribute. And so there's the two percentages calculated each year, and they're recalculated each year.
Right. Okay, thank you. That answers that question for me. Yeah, I do. I just thought that I'd get the basics out the way so that I knew the splits. So when I look at on page 23, right, and we're looking at the Seaview Wastewater Treatment Plant, the second dashboard, it says that stage 2 annual plan to be confirmed by Hutt City Council. So when as officers, do we think that Hutt City Council will make that decision? Because it's estimated to be $4 million higher in the total that was estimated in the LTP. So I'm assuming our split of that is going to be the 30, well, a third. That's for the Seaview wastewater treatment plant. That's on page 23. It says funding changes request in stage 2 annual plan to be confirmed by Hutt City Council level 1 estimate is calculated at 4 million higher than the total LTP funding, threatening the feasibility of the project.
In terms of decision making, the decision making is from both councils, so that should really be Hutt City and Upper Hutt City.
Right.
In terms of making those decisions. And that hence, you know, the briefing that's taking place on Wednesday next week, so that the councillors together can understand for the sludge dryer project what the impact is going to be, because there is some change. And so we wanted to do that together.
Right.
And there may well be different implications, as I understand it, for each council in terms of the process.
So Bruce, to carry on what you've just said, then that would cover all the others that talk about to be confirmed with Hutt City. It's a joint conversation.
Absolutely.
And that would happen on the 7th.
So for the sludge dryers to the 7th, but
Yeah.
for other projects, there is conversation that occurs through Upper Hutt officers and ourselves around those particular projects.
Because there are, sorry, through you, Chair. Bruce, there are some that are in here where there are funding change requests, but there's no dollar value there.
That's right.
So when will we get an indication of when they might happen? And this is particularly on page 24, where we talk about the Seaview, the clarifier renewals, where, you know, there's no value there.
So Wellington Water is currently working through advice to both councils in terms of the annual plan.
Right.
And we're getting that around the same time. So I know ours is due today, and
Right.
I believe yours is going to be available on Monday, but the work that's done is coordinated so that advice is within both of our, you know, specific advice on JV matters is in both of those pieces of advice. So you'll get them around the same time that we do.
Okay. Right, thank you. And then my last question for you to the chair, and it's probably to the chair rather than the officers. Para 7. Is there a page 9? Sorry, your finger has to work. Para 7. Is there any reason why there wasn't an Upper Hutt's representative at that meeting?
Was the compliance visit to the Seaview,
Yeah.
This is at an officer level that we're talking about, not elected members.
So then from an officer perspective, do we know why there wasn't an officer?
I don't know.
That's why I asked the chair, because I thought maybe he might be able to tell me. Okay.
Was an invite extended?
I'm assuming it was.
Maybe chase it up with Jeff.
Yeah, I will. Thanks.
I mean, maybe the last two, but even to chase it up. Oh, come on,
Morning, through you, Mr. Chair. So look, I'll check up on the, I can check up on whether an invite was sent through for us and get back to you, Councillor, as well.
Thank you. You got a question? Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'll call for a move. Councillor Dyer, seconder. Councillor Stellinger, all those in favour?
Sorry,
Sorry.
Want to make a comment to it, but want to make a comment.
Oh, sorry. After the any comments? Yes. Comment as well? Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the officers for their hard work on where we are right now. It's been, I mean, I've been on this committee for 6 years. happening for a very long time, and I think this is the first time we've had a report where there's been no fully quality, no discharge events and no non-complying notices from the regional council. So I did just want to acknowledge the work of the officers in the room. I know the public is very hot on this issue at the moment, and I know that they're keeping you on their toes, but I've heard from numerous sources of people that are directly affected, particularly around Seaview, that the increase in the communications with the community has gone such a long way, and I can see from what you're saying today that that's going to be built in as we move forward. So just really want to acknowledge your work.
Thank you. We acknowledge that when we do the transporting of the site, it's going to be a real test for us to make sure that we can back that communication up and get through that with them well informed. Can't promise no odor, but we can promise it should be able to deliver communication. So thank you.
Yes, I was going to make a comment along similar lines. I've been a bit vocal on a couple of issues around the financial aspects of Wellington Water of late, but I've been extremely impressed by the work that's going on right now, and particularly the project in my vicinity, along with Councillor Parkins and Councillor Edwards, live almost adjacent on the Belmont Hill, so we get to have been, travelling through the works there, which seem to happen remarkably quickly and smoothly. So congrats on that, but also just the scope of work and the progress that's been made on a number of big projects. I've been very impressed, so thanks very much. And also I share Councillor Carson's comments on the reporting, which to us I think is very good.
Thank you. So we've got a mover and Councillor Dyer and seconder and Councillor Fellinger. Head of debate. All those in favour? All right, those against? Declare that carried. Thank you, thank you. We'll wait for a second while they all come out the door. Look at that word. Look at that word. Sorry, go. And we'll move on to item 6, which is our update on Silverstream Landfill. Oh, Jeff. Report, have you got any updates for us?
Only just to acknowledge that we have been working with Wastewater on the disposal of sludge when they shut down the dryer, so we're across that and making plans for the landfill to accommodate that material when it comes.
Does any questions?
Thank you. This paper is silent on the Manor Park transfer station facility. Why is that, Brent?
There's been no progress made on that in terms of so that's currently through the consenting stage between the consenting authority, which is with Hutt City. But we have a sort of Chinese wall between us and the consenting process. We are still talking to Waste Management about what operational setup could be established down there to the benefit of the Hutt Valley residents. So we are in talks with them about various design components and what the infrastructure might look like should that project go. But there's not been a further update at this stage that we were able to provide. I'm not sure if it's also mentioned in the climate change and sustainability paper that goes to Hutt City. I think there might be an update.
I just I think I did read in the post that the local residents, Manor Park residents, were up in arms about it, or a certain group of them were going to take some sort of court action or something, or delaying action on it. Is that right? Can you comment on that?
That's kind of, yeah, that would be part of that consenting process.
Okay.
I imagine. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sort of on the same matter, in driving past there recently, there's quite a bit of work going on, and the land looks like it's being raised up. And I just wonder how that fits with the consenting. If the consenting is still underway, then how is this work being done?
So I'm aware of there's two consents for that site. Site one was the bulk earthworks to raise the level of the site, prepare it for future use. And that consent was granted and that work is begun, and that's the work that's visible there now. And there's another consent that's been filed to establish a transfer station at the site.
If it's useful, because obviously this has nothing to do with the landfill, there's a really good page on our website that's got all the consents and it's a really good public facing page. I bet all your questions will be answered having a read through that.
Okay.
All the consent process is really laid out really nicely on there.
Okay, thank you.
Being more credits is what you got to search for.
Start with this question.
There's a very brief update going to our Infrastructure and Regulatory Committee next week, I think, but on the agenda papers, just for interest of the members. And intersection upgrade consent has been approved. Consent for the resource recovery park is still being processed with no decision on notification.
Ultimately, if you're talking about court appearances and cases getting brought, then that'll delay the process and go through an environmental sort of a lens, wouldn't it? And just make it a longer consenting process.
Unless they don't get resolution.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Wales?
I thank you for coming along. So my question is on page 42 and it's on para 9. And it's about reducing the volumes and prioritisation of short-term airspace created in the existing phase 2 footprint. So you've awarded another person to come in because you're behind time. So do you see that reducing of waste volumes lasting for a period, a lengthy period of time, or with awarding someone to come in and help you with that's how long are we talking about reducing volumes at a time?
We're not
in this mitigation.
So that is mitigated by reducing waste
Yeah.
volumes as a matter of the demand for
Yeah.
airspace. So we're not reducing, we're not restricting disposal at the moment. That's
not.
just the fact that there is a reduction in disposal driven by outside factors.
Right, so it's not because of the work.
We're not restricting, yeah, exactly.
We talked quite a bit about this a wee while ago, and it's around the slowdown in building. The volumes going into the landfill at the moment are
Yeah.
I like.
quite a bit longer.
So all that's saying is that helps with the fact that some of the airspace development has been delayed. But we also have this extra work that's being built. That's bringing on more airspace. Should volumes return to normal, we will have the capacity to manage that.
So then brings me to the question was, then did you need to actually get another contractor to come and help you if the volumes were low? Because it says, works are behind schedule due to contractor delays and council is working on bringing additional contractor in. I mean, if the conversation was, as per the chair had said, was there actually a need to incur any extra costs?
Well, it's not extra cost. It's work that would be done at some point anyway. I think the idea was to get the work done as fast as possible so that should volumes return to normal, and we just don't have a crystal ball. We don't know if that's going to happen in 6 months or a year, but to have this capacity online will be prudent, I think, to manage that eventuality. And it's part of the work program, so it's not a new capital expense for us. It's just making sure that it gets done within the timeframe we want, rather than pushed out.
In that vein, talking in here about the sludge and there's no volumes. Is it quite a volume that comes out of the sludge treatment? Does it affect your airspace?
Not really, not from an airspace point of view. Most of it ends up as water, to be honest, and but it's an operational issue in terms of digging trenches into the waste mass to dispose of it.
Questions, councillor Barton?
Have we had an update on the soil and aggregate recovery facility? It notes that we will put Hogan's likely have a proposal in the coming weeks. I was just wondering if it's come within the gap between.
No, we have had an update from them and they have paused their project at this stage to I guess reconsider the commercial aspect of it. So we're going to meet with them again shortly just to understand what the barriers are for them right now and whether we can move it into a stage. But it's yeah, that paused it.
There's not likely to be another contract that we can talk to about a similar arrangement.
It's possible, it's possible. Yeah, I mean, the project was instigated through Form Hogan's desire to set up such a facility. But it's possible there is another party that would like that at the landfill site.
Councillor Shaw.
So question for my information, page 44 it is, and it's just a breakdown of the costs. Having recently had to change tyres on a car, I got levied a fee for the tyres to be taken away. Are tyres actually buried at the landfill or are they taken away for recycling?
The ones that are disposed of are buried. A lot of them are used actually for operational purposes to hold down the liner as a buffer layer before the waste is put on. So they tend to get stockpiled and used for that purpose. We are still investigating, making sure there's enough disposal sites in the valley for tyre wires collections, which is free for 4 to 5 tyres you can drop off for free at a registered collection site. So we're looking into that. There are currently those sites outside of the Hutt in Akatarawa, for example. And the scheme is up and running now, so when you, so theoretically there should be space tyres that are recycling through the scheme at the retailers. But there are still obviously stockpiles of tyres about the place that will have to move through.
Just to continue on with that point though, the tyre fee that you were charged is the fee that the new tyre has put on it by the government legislation sort of driven thing. Those tyres aren't collected and taken to landfill. Is that correct?
Oh, is that
Is
your
that
question about when you got new tyres on your car?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the new product stewardship scheme called Tyre Wise. So there are levies on all new tyres and it funds their recycling at the end of life. So that when you bring your tyres back or you have your tyres changed again, those tyres will always be recycled.
But the ultimate goal of that is to stop them getting to landfills.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, sorry, that's
Right.
right after.
And my second question is, can you just let me know why polystyrene is so expensive in comparison to say like asbestos? What is it about polystyrene?
Well, polystyrene is just inherently annoying at the landfill site. You have, you know, when it gets broken, it becomes airborne. It's very hard to manage from that perspective, so it can be just a massive litter hazard. The other thing, it doesn't compact very well, and it sort of takes up quite a lot of airspace. And we basically just don't want it in the landfill. We can avoid it, so it's priced accordingly. It's also by volume, it's incredibly light. So a ton of polystyrene could be an entire truckload of material. So it's to bear in mind that that's the kind of volumes you're talking about. About a ton versus a ton of something else.
Is there alternatives to dumping it at landfill? I mean, I don't know of any myself.
Limited, but not in Wellington. There's, I don't think.
Can I add to that? There is Expol and Taita do collect polystyrene. The only problem is they only do it for individuals, not for corporate. So I don't know if that's something we can work with them on so that we can turn more of that waste stream into recycling.
Yeah, possibly. I know there's also an outfit in Army that does like slightly larger volumes. Most of what comes to the landfill is sort of old fridge panels, and things like large quantities from demolition jobs.
And that sort of that's been picked up by the product stewardship in other countries quite a lot of new products that are coming into the country now are wrapped in cardboard instead of polystyrene. A lot of the polystyrene stuff's
Yes.
getting taken off the market because of these reasons. It's such a hard hazard to deal with.
Yeah.
So any other questions before we move on to council? Council?
Thank you through your chair. Page 43.15 talks about the landfill normally receiving dry sludge and that the wet sludge is operationally challenging. Could you explain more about that? So, because the dry sludge arriving at landfill is going to end up wet at some point anyway. So, could you explain why it's challenging to take on the wet sludge?
Sure, so the dry sludge comes in pellet forms, it looks like sort of wood pellets, and so it's quite inert when it arrives in terms of odor. And when it does become wet, it's obviously an issue, but it gets disposed of in the waste bin very rather quickly. And it doesn't, and it compacts and forms part of the general waste. Whereas sludge is dewatered, so it's kind of like a jelly, sort of sloppy jelly, and so it doesn't really, you can't compact it. It's highly odorous and hazardous, and so it needs to be put into trenches and immediately covered. So the trenches need to be dug into the existing waste mass, and then trucks need to dump the sludge into these trenches, and then the trenches need to be filled, sort of a sandwich of sludge and then cover and sludge and cover as the trenches get filled. So the problem is that you need to have enough waste that you can dig into to make these trenches. So effectively, you're also trying to tip other waste around this on the tip pad. So you just have, it's just a lot more traffic management, site management, a lot more hazards with having open trenches. So.
Thank you.
Just building on that question, the work, the most left the room, but the work, the dry renewal mean we're going to be getting a lot more sludge from, do we know how long that period of time is going to be, and are we going to be set up fine to handle?
Yep, so we're working, they've been upfront of that. We're already aware of when that's happening, and the landfill operator has got a plan ready to receive that sludge. In a sense, we're sort of always on standby for receiving sludge from Seaview because the plant is old and can break down at any time.
Having said that though, the replacement of the dryer is very critical because there is ultimately limits to how much wet sludge we can take. So if the dryer were to fail permanently at this point, that would become a significant problem for us to take all this material.
And the biosolids now are currently the product of the current dryer we've got.
Yes.
The new dryer that's being looked at, is it envisioned to be very similar or something that's easier for you, or?
We basically create a very similar dry product. It might look slightly differently depending on the dryer technology that they use, but it's operationally much easier to handle.
I know that in other countries or other places, they use that dried mass as a fertilizer for non-eatable products.
Yeah, so in Penrith, for example, and just on the outskirts of Sydney, they do compost the material. That's over here. There are obviously acceptance issues, particularly around cultural concerns. So that's why that hasn't been done. And composting sludge material is used overseas in various settings. But yeah, at this point, that's not feasible. Having said that, the dried biosolids that we are receiving at the landfill, so we have done a trial, which is on page 44, explained briefly. So that has been successful in plant growth. And so we're looking at applying for a consent to see if we can utilize some of that material to help with remediating those borrow areas that were previously used for soil extraction. But it wouldn't be used for food production. No.
Any other comments or questions? So I'll pass on to Ian, who wants to.
Yeah, just at the end of I've just joined today and you'll probably see a little bit more of me, but that's because Jeff has decided to leave council. So that's creating a little bit of. So I'd like to thank Jeff for all his hard work and obviously he's been coming to this committee and updating you guys, but this will be his last committee, unfortunately. So
Thank you and go well. It's been a pleasure to have you here. You're a nice, calmly spoken man. Councillor Swans.
Can I just say something about that with regard to Jeff? Thank you for all the work that you've done, not only on both councils at Hutt and Upper Hutt, but also in a regional forum with respect to supporting you at those regional meetings. Much appreciated. And your mannerism and the way that you deliver things certainly de-escalates some of the conversations that happen around some of the tables. And I wish you well in your next endeavour.
Thank you.
So thank you.
All right, so I'll call for a mover and seconder. Councillor Dyer and I'll second it myself. Is there any debate? I'll move on. No, so all those in favour? Aye. And against, I'll declare that motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7, we've got the Akatarawa cemetery update. Places, facilities. And Mike here to give us an update. Any update, Mike?
Thank you, Chair. Is for the Hutt colleagues, my name is Mike Ryan. I'm Group Manager of Community Services here at Hutt City Council. Our Open Spaces Manager is on a well-deserved break at the moment, so I've been thrown into the hot pit to present and answer any of your questions. Firstly, the consent from Greater Wellington Regional Council has been received. There is an issue that we are contesting and pushing back on in respect to the runoff. And we are asking Greater Wellington Regional Council for more information and for a little bit more data as to how they've determined that we need to do a little bit more work to accommodate that runoff. The costings of the work is required to be done under the consent is in and around the $45,000 to $50,000 mark. But as I say, the project team and the people that we are using in respect to consultants are questioning why Greater Wellington Regional Council has included this as part of the consent process. And the other part that I'd just like to highlight is the review under clauses 8, 9, and then 10 of the capacity of Akatarawa Cemetery and the changing in respect to current capacity and then capacity based on the development that we're currently looking at undertaking. I'm happy to answer any questions, and if I can't answer them, I'll say that I can't answer them and I'll find the answers for you.
Questions for the director? Councillor Carson.
So I'm referring to the email from Daniel Chrisp. You've read it?
That's a tabled document, you mean?
Tabled document.
You probably haven't seen it.
Through you, I am aware of some of those correspondence and have been involved in some of the responses, but the specific email you referring to.
Thursday, the 1st of May, the first point is in para 1, which is saying that the procurement process was not followed and the consultant was direct appointed. Were the committee aware of this? That is this committee. So can you find out about that, please? And the reason why it was a direct procurement, if that was correct. These are under
Chrisp. I think it's a bit on the nose to ask for a response right now, but maybe we.
No, that's what I'm asking for. Yeah, so I'm asking for a response.
Yeah.
Secondly, that in the response to the new capacity numbers, he was told that the hectares information wasn't available. So I'd like to know why it's not available, and if it is available, can we have it, please, for the stages 1 to 5? And my own questions are, can in future we actually have on this report, financial reporting on the CAPEX development, the CAPEX side of it, that is against budget, and spread over the years? And lastly, can you give an indication of what population aging factors have been brought into the capacity estimates, please, for both cities?
Are you happy with just recording those yourself, or do you want?
Through you, as
That's
probably
can't answer
this email was sent on the 1st of May,
Yeah.
is so having an
Don't
opportunity.
expect you to answer
So,
that.
so we'll go through that and then provide an appropriate answer and then run that through the committee.
So, we just, governments have just informed me that they'll capture the information and get it to you to look for a reply, please.
And I've made notes with the CAPEX and the budget and population aging factors and the methodology used to calculate the capacity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, and I think this probably ties into the same thing. It's the calculation. I know Hutt City looks at calculating 1.1% growth. When that compounds over 50 years, that's a 70% increase. And I'm just wondering whether or not those burial capacities actually include the capacity for growth, and then, as Councillor Carson said, change in death and burial rates. It would be good to have that a little bit more information. It's great that we've got it, but I'm just, yeah.
And that is a question I've actually asked, is we, the clause 8 and 9 explain it at a really high level, what was the change methodology and right through from A to Z that was used and what was included or not included in that methodology that was used.
Thank you. So we'd really like to see a bit more of a paper come back around that. Any further questions?
Yep.
Oh,
No.
no, Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just wanted to ask about the mulching of the site on page 50. So what exactly is being mulched, and is there a great deal of loss of trees in the area? And obviously the Greater Wellington consented that and haven't opposed for that reason, or? So
No, the issue with Greater Wellington Regional Council is in respect to the consent is to do with runoff,
right,
not to do with the mulching.
Yeah.
Having walked up through all of the land there, the majority of the foliage that is to be mulched is gorse and manuka.
Okay, thank you.
There are a few trees up there, and where possible, we are looking to incorporate and leave the trees, and they are mainly pine trees. There is, I think, no, I won't say that. I think there are some, not manuka, macrocarpa, but where possible, we are looking to retain those trees, but the majority of the land is gorse and manuka.
Thank you.
Thank you. So no further questions. I'll move that and call for a seconder. Councillor Carson seconds. Is there any debate? Then I'll call all those in favour. Those against. I'll declare the motion carried. Item 8 is the Hutt Valley Services Committee Forward Work Programme. Thank you, Director. Order the Hutt City Council Governance Advisor dated 9th April is attached. Any updates to that report? Any questions or discussion around that work programme coming forward? Then I'll move that we receive it. Councillor Mill second it. Any debate? All those in favour? Aye. Yes, no, I'll declare that motion carried. And we'll declare the meeting closed at 11:04. Thank you, everybody. Cup of tea and